Y'all are brave, brave souls getting up this early after the party and everything like that, so I really appreciate. Good to have you all here. So, my name is MichaelSmith, or Dr. Bearsek, and we're proudly presenting the Maru Architecture Design, a proposed BYOD architecture for a shifting threat landscape, or subtitled in a fun Dr. Strangelove capacity, how I learned to stop worrying and be, semi-okay with BYOD. So, how many of you are actually doing BYOD in your organizations? Anyone? All right, we've got a couple. All right, how many of the thought of it just terrifies you? All right, yeah, more and more there. And it's a good reason, good thing, I can understand that. Well, what we say about it is don't panic. One of my favorite pictures, I love the ninja on fire. That's pretty much me in pen testing, just running around with the head on fire. So, my name is MichaelSmith. I'm a security consultant for E+, 10-year veteran of the IAT industry. Actually, now it's about 11, so need to update this. I'm a doctoral candidate at Capital College in Information Assurance, working on security intelligence analytics. My list of alphabet certifications, nothing special there. Mostly focus on security assessments and BYOD, a bunch of other crap that you may or may not have heard of or like. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, @DrBearsek is my name. So you get all kinds of smart-ass remarks from me all the time on there. So today we're going to talk about just briefly what is BYOD. Most of you know, so I'm not going to focus on that very long. We're going to talk about BYOD and how it relates to what I call the shifting threat landscape. Most of you are going to be familiar with the concepts of that once we go over it, so no worries there. Why BYOD, why I think it's here to stay, the benefits and challenges, and then we're going to look at some implementation examples, kind of in the general architecture of how it's done today, and then look at the Maru architecture design. The Maru design is kind of a hybrid design of those principles. We talk about minimal trust security and the minimal trust logical security layers that are built into the design, and then areas of improvement, future work, and then any questions that we might have. So BYOD, we all know, is bring your own device. It's use your own devices. It's a growing trend. For the purposes of this talk, we're not just talking about cell phones for BYOD. We are talking about laptops and cell phones. Any kind of consumer device that your users might want to bring into their network, whether it be their MacBook, whether it be their HP laptop, their Chromebook, their smartphone, their tablet, their who's-its, their what's-its, their gidgets and gadgets. So the wow, say that 3 times fast. Shifting threat landscape. So in the God, all right, the STL. In the STL this morning, yeah, all right, shouldn't have said that many words this early in the morning. It's a matter of when, and by that what I mean is, it's a matter of when you will be hacked. Anyone in here think that their network is completely hack-proof? All right, good, there's no liars in the room here. Only time it's completely hack-proof is when the CIO is bearing down your ass and you just pray it's hack-proof there. It's a matter of when. At some point, you're going to be breached. It's just going to happen. How bad it happens, how much damage is done, that's what we're looking to control, mitigate. So most hacks, most people that are breaching your network, yeah, we have the hacktivists, yeah, we have the APT, this nation states coming after us. The main people doing it are primeware. It's the mob. Who runs a lot of the IT security threats nowadays? Well, a lot of the stuff, the malware, it's all done by the Russian mob, main part, other criminal groups out there. Their goal, their business is data theft. They want to get in there, they want to steal the social security numbers, they want to steal the credit card numbers, date of birth, the PII, any bit of information that they can go sell. I've seen ads out there in the deep darker regions of the internet. Hey, buy a $5,000 credit limit credit card number for $300, $400 bucks. Hey, black market sale, people are buying them. They make a lot of money because business is good. We all know trying to catch a lot of these people is not super easy. A lot of times the way people get caught in these attacks literally is because they can't keep their mouths shut. So, the people that shut up, the people that are good about it, they have a pretty good success rate about not getting caught. That's why they keep doing it. Business is good. Plus, add in the fact that people are overseas jurisdictions and you run with all that crap, and it's really, makes it a lot more difficult. So, as we all know in this room, the weakest link is people, right? If I'm going after you, I can either try to, your brand new patch, really built up perimeter, I can try to fuzz you, look for O-days, that kind of stuff. Or I can just go to that guy sitting at the front desk that might like to click things, send him an email, and hey, get into his system that way. So most of us that do pen testing, this is one of our favorite targets, is going after people, some kind of social engineering, phishing, et cetera. BYOD is the probable future, and the reason I feel this way is we're seeing a shift for a number of reasons. One of the main reasons is as the younger kids are coming up in the group, they're used to basically customizable life. You know, customizable, very specific. They want to use their own stuff, and they're looking for companies that let them do that. So where you'll see a lot of companies, and I've heard this out of the mouths of CIOs, CSOs, CEOs, is they'll start tailoring BYOD policies simply to be able to attract the best and top talent. So the first rule of Fight Club is do not talk, and I have the wrong slide deck. I'm sorry there. All right, so the first rule of a shifting threat landscape, I said it right that time. Assume you will be breached. Can anyone guess what the second rule of a shifting threat landscape is? Assume you will be breached. Third rule, knowledge is power. I'm a very big advocate, if you can tell by my dissertation is on security analytics and intelligence, of knowing as much about your network as possible. Not only about your internal network, have as much information there, but know about what's going on the outside. If you're not OSINTing yourself all the time and gathering information like you would in a pen test, looking out there, looking on Twitter, looking on the internet, finding out what anyone with public internet access can find out about you, to me, you're doing yourself a disservice. I won't say you're doing it wrong, because I don't believe in saying that phrase, but you're doing yourself a disservice. So I think you should bring in, consider doing on a regular basis just to find out what people might be able to learn about you. Fourth rule, detection is as important as prevention. We've all in IT been focused on preventing. It's all about get my wall up, prevent them from coming in. Well, as we've talked about, people being the weakest link and the types of attacks that are out there now, and we talk about the shifting threat landscape, I'm talking about attacks like client-side attacks, social engineering, malware, you know, the web attacks, not the old school traditional, finding the server, finding that MS-08, 067, breaching you in there, because let's be honest, for most of us, with anyone with semi-competent security, those holes are not there. You're patching, you're blocking. People aren't stupid anymore in security. They understand where they're at. So instead of stepping up with, well, most people. All right, yeah, most people are not stupid. As you're stepping up, as they're stepping up, they're instead of going for more highly sophisticated, highly technical attacks, go in the opposite way. Yeah, all of us have done pen tests, we're lazy. We automate things because we want to make it simple on ourselves. Am I going to expend the effort, hours and hours looking for a 0-day, or am I going to go attack the guy at the accountant desk that's playing solitaire and looking at you know, Facebook all day long? I'm going to go after him because chances are my success rate is going to be a lot higher. So by detection is as important as prevention, our goal is to, if we assume we're going to be breached, our goal is to detect that breach as soon as possible. That will help limit our damage there. Fifth rule, never trust the GUI center. We can have the biggest, brightest wall out there. You can have the top firewall people in the world. We build the best of the best up there. We have IDS. We have everything layered on top of there. If someone leaves the back door open, you're going to be breached either way. So never trust the GUI center, and those of you familiar with Zero Trust know exactly what I'm talking about in that standard. And the sixth rule, always be reassessing and always be improving. Never rest on your laurels. You, as security people, always need to be out there looking for the newest technologies. You need to be testing your network. And if you have something in place that looks like it works, but there might be something out there that can improve your security, look at it. Look at bringing it in. Do a demo, do a lab. You know, not saying throw it into production tomorrow because that's always a recipe for disaster, but definitely test it out and take a look and always be improving your network. All right, so some of the benefits and challenges we have of BYOD. Challenges, loss of control. And this is what scares the hell out of most of us that have been on the system admin, network admin side. We don't like the fact that we're losing control based on BYOD. We don't have full control over those boxes. And so because of that, because you know, we always feel that we know more than the user, then, and you know, for the most part that is true, but we always have that feeling that we know more than the user, we can protect them from themselves. We want to have that control over there. Well, as BYOD comes into place, we lose that control. We're worried about malware exposure. People out there, in the malware, surfing to the internet on their home computers, searching porn, BitTorrent, wherever, finding nice little files that they execute and then launch some kind of nasty-ass virus on their system that's blackmailing them or bringing a Trojan into my network. Data loss and exposure. This is a big one for most women. This is honestly usually the biggest fear that I hear from most, especially C-level people. is that worry about losing data, that worry about exposing that privileged information, either to some kind of attacker, or they're going to end up on the news the way groups like Sony, HB Gary, Microsoft, Apple. Do I need to go on? No, I don't. We all know what I'm talking about. And then hidden costs. Funny thing with BYOD is at times it does sound like it will be a saver because you're not making those capital expenditures. Well, the problem is if you don't properly plan it, there are hidden costs that you may not think about when you're first doing the cost-benefit analysis of BYOD. So those hidden costs are also a fear of people, and you have to make sure when you're planning out your BYOD strategy that you take those kind of hidden costs into account. And by that I might mean if you're covering data, for instance, if you're going to subsidize your people for data, what's it cost for there? What's going to be the cost of bringing some of your equipment up to speed? Are you going to need to do new training? Are you going to need to do new equipment? And most likely you will. But what are those costs going to be? So those kind of hidden costs. What are some of the benefits? Well, we talked about attracting top talent. When we talk about attracting top talent, we're talking about the young guys, the millennials. A lot of companies are starting to go to BYOD because that is what those people want. And the fear is that if they don't do this, their competitors are going to hire these guys. I went to the ISC Congress last year in Chicago. And Spectrum Health, the CISO up there, was up there talking, and he said, we had to do it. He said, my competitors are doing it. They're getting guys that I can't touch because even if I offer them more money, it's not all about the money. They want to be set up to do work that work in the way that they want to do it. And so we had to adapt to that. And you're going to start seeing more and more of that as time goes by. And yes, there's going to be people battling against it. I mean, I'm not foolish to say that there's not, it's a ubiquitous, everyone's going to come do it and embrace the change right away. It's not going to happen. But eventually you're going to see more and more people start to go towards that thing. If we think about it from the standpoint of the shifting threat landscape, if we're talking about how we no longer trust the outside, and we have to actually worry about the GUI center because that outside isn't going to completely protect us, well then, is our internal equipment really as safe as we might think it is just because we control it? And if we start treating everything in the sense that it's not, and start treating all of our equipment, whether it's company-owned or whether it's user-owned, as basically being as secure, the same level of security, then we start to rethink how we do security. Can increase productivity. Numerous studies out there show that if users are able to set up their computers in the way that they want to, do their own workflows, use the tools that they are accustomed to using and like to use, it generally does increase their productivity. Some of the companies going to BYOD, for instance, VMware saved $5 million a year on productivity costs because of their changes. Intel, even more impressively, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the number. I want to say it was 200 million hours. If you DM me, I'll get you an exact number. But they saved about 200 million man-hours a year estimated by their switching to BYOD and letting people do the work in the way that they want to do it. Potential cost savings. There are some cost savings that we talked about if you do keep the hidden costs under control. Cost savings from the standpoint of we don't have those capital expenditures anymore. And there are even studies out there for those of you that think, oh, I don't want to switch to BYOD because I'm going to have to subsidize my employee data plans or my employee phone plans. Well, Good did a study last year, and what they found out is about 60% of the people said they're more than willing to cover their own costs as far as data is concerned, as far as phone is concerned, if they can use their own phone, because most people don't want to carry around 2 cell phones. Hell, I did it for years where I just used my own cell phone and threw my corporate phone in the desk drawer. I didn't want to carry 2 phones around. Screw it, I'll use my own minutes. It's just easier that way. And then green IT, everyone wants to be green. If we're not buying as many computers, we're not throwing as many away. So it's a minor thing, but hey, it looks good for the marketing folk. So adoption views, BYOD in the enterprise. These are some of the companies that have BYOD in their enterprise. EA, Dell, Spectrum, Intel, Cisco, VMware, E+ where I work. Have it to some extent, whether it's just phone or phone and laptop, they offer it to some extent. And there's numerous other companies. These are just some of the big ones, plus my own shameless plug for my company. Plus, it makes them feel good about covering the cost of my trip. So, 59% of companies feel that they are at a competitive disadvantage without BYOD. This was in the recent Dell Vanson Bourne survey. In 5 years, BYOD will be ubiquitous. That's Dr. Cindy Wang from Forrester. If you ever have the chance to read some of her work, outstanding on the topic of BYOD, especially BYOD and Zero Trust. So a lot of the concepts for the design are building off of her original research and ideas. So now, not everyone feels this way. BYOD isn't unavoidable by the CIO of NOAA. Which devices are best suited to allow employees to do their job? Paul Green from the Sheffield City Council feels you need to ask that question. Is BYOD necessary? Is BYOD necessary? And Nucleus Research, unlike every other research company in the world that says BYOD is growing and growing, they feel that with the arrival of Windows 8 and enterprise tablets, et cetera, that enterprise mobility will grow and BYOD will decline. I strongly disagree with that statement, as most people do, but apparently to them, Windows 8 is the savior and messiah of the internet world. And with the snickers and laughter, I see none of you feel that way as well. So these are some of the existing MDM architectures. Mobile device management. We have our device-centric architecture. Both corporate and user-owned devices. And basically device-centric is we're focusing on securing the device. We want to make sure our laptop is secure. We want to make sure our phone is secure. This is as close to traditional IT as we talk in its current form. So where we're talking heavy focus on like the MDM solutions, your Good, your Mobile Iron, AirWatch, ZenPry, well no, Citrix Zen now, and Mass 360, all those fun things out there. You all get bombarded with the emails on a daily basis, I'm sure. It has a heavier touch of the device. You're controlling the device. You're minimizing your risk on your data by securing the endpoint. And you're using, users usually focuses on the native interface. Some of you that used MDM solutions know that it kind of just gives you a control over it. Some of them have pocketed, what's the word? Kind of, pocketed sections of it that are only for they're under the control, store the data in there, trying to keep it breached. Those of you who have seen some of the smartphone penetration testing talks know that may not be all as safe as some of them seem to think it is. Data-centric approach. So what a data-centric approach starts to do is look at running basically virtual desktoping on your mobile devices. Your client-based deployments, this is your VDI, some of your Citrix, all those fun companies that get out there and put the virtual desktop on there. The biggest problem with a data-centric approach is that while using on a laptop, no problems at all, piece of cake, those of us who have tried to use RDP on our phones, how fun is that to do? It is a last minute, I need an emergency and have to make a fix, and I really don't feel like going home at this point, and it's 3 a.m. at a HackerCon, and I need to make this change. And yes, I've done it numerous times, but it sucks to work on there. So it's not conducive to the interface. And then the third approach is application-centric. This is where things will end up going. And application-centric kind of combines that data-centric feel, but does streaming apps in the sense of those of you who use Citrix and use the streaming apps as Citrix, but more in a mobile situation, kind of a native-based interface on a mobile app. So touch-based applications that you can run virtualized, they're still stored on the server side, but you're utilizing on your mobile devices like they are like it is a native app. The problem with application-centric is it's a very young field. There's not a lot of people out there that have really nailed it yet. Closest I have seen is the Citrix Cloud Gateway. Impressive product. To me, it's not there yet, but it is. Right now, to me, it's the closest that I've seen. VMware has a couple of interesting options out there as well. That, to me, is where we're going to see it going in the next 4 or 5 years, and it's going to, most of the more secure are going to focus on the application-centric. So, what we're looking for with BOD and when the Maru architecture is a combination of all those techniques. So I call it a bridge technology because it's out there more to bridge your way into that application-centric approach down there. It's going to let you utilize a lot of your existing equipment, maybe in different configurations, but utilize a lot of that. It uses elements of zero trust and also elements of defense in depth. So we're not fully throwing out defense in depth, although we kind of use it in a different capacity than what we normally would. For a secure BYOD architecture, I'm a big believer in strong written policies and strong technical controls. Too often we focus just on the technical controls and we forget the fact that the policies are out there to guide us, they're out there to guide the users, and the technical controls are there to basically enforce and support those policies. So always remember that the policies are just as important as your technical controls in your overall environment. Plus lawsuits and legalities, all that stuff, you get sued, having those policies in place can be your golden ticket to save you. Now, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take that as legal advice, but from what I've heard from lawyers, including professors I've had in classes, that generally putting out that best effort, putting out and showing showing that you are doing everything possible to secure your network will help eliminate some of that liability that you may face in lawsuits. So we're doing a user-centric approach. It's about the user. We want to be there helping the user. That's why we're not forcing and saddling them with a certain architecture. We're giving them the ability to support. We're giving them the ability to do the work in the capacity that they want to do. So minimal trust. When we talk about minimal trust, it's because it's based on no trust design principles. Anyone familiar with the Forrester no trust architectures? All right. Do some Googling, read it. For free, go to ISACOM. The Mobius defense builds on the same exact concepts. Both are excellent groups. The Forrester stuff is paywalled, but there are some companies that have it out there as kind of free marketing giveaway. Put in the fake email address, download it. They are good white papers. They're excellent done white papers. Forrester just charges for their research, but there are companies that put it out there as marketing. Meanwhile, ISACOM, like everything else that they do, have it publicly. Excellent paper. So I call it minimal trust because basically no trust at this point is not ready for prime time. The concept of it basically is that every packet on your network is inspected. So you almost have a central core type switch. It's literally doing firewall packet inspection on every packet that goes through and around and in and out your network. Now, those of you that deal with network on a regular basis can already spot where that might be kind of a difficult thing. Where for a small network, I may have to throw provider-level equipment out there to pull this off in this day and age, and we know that that size of network is never going to be able to afford that, and the bigger guys is going to be even more difficult to do. Now, some of you, that deal in that space more than I do may have some solution ideas. Fantastic, and that's a good thing. My research, I wasn't able to find all that much outside of like a provider class firewalls, and again, not going to work in most small business networks. Definitely not going to have the bandwidth and throughput for like an enterprise level. So it's just not ready for prime time. 5-10 years from now, hey, maybe the equipment will exist. So when we say minimal trust is because we can't pull off that complete no trust, but we're going to try to do it as much as possible, hence the minimal. We're combining aspects of the three main architecture types: device-centric, data-centric, and application-centric. It's about the users and the data. We're going to control the data within the enterprise. We're not worrying about controlling the data on the device. Instead, we're going to limit the data touching the device. And we don't want to control the experience. We want to give the users the experience. Our goal is to protect our data internally, and our goal is to deliver that data to the users. And then it's all about in-depth insight about your network. Controlling the delivery, we're inspecting traffic at the data access points, and we're doing enterprise intelligence gathering. And this is going to be a hotter and hotter topic in enterprise intelligence gathering, security analytics. I know a lot of you have been bombarded with stuff lately about it. RSA, Solera, all those companies out there are starting to go to that approach. IBM just announced a big initiative with it. I think HP is doing some stuff with it as well. So there's a lot of information out there, and that's where really one of the hot growth areas in the security industry is going to be over the next couple of years, in my opinion. So this is kind of a complex example of the architecture design just on a high level in use. So I'm not going to focus on this slide too often, too much, but you can kind of get an idea of just where we're going. Looks a little complex. So there's 6 minimal trust security layers in this design. All starts out with our data architecture layer. We have a virtualization layer, defensive security infrastructure layer, application, device user, and then our intelligence layer. You can see the intelligence layer is at the bottom of the pyramid because it supports everything up above it. And it kind of just goes nicely on that capacity. So data architecture layer, that's our virtual layer, our logical layer that basically is where we're controlling our data. We're talking about our SANs, our NAS, our JBOD, databases, et cetera. This is where we're focusing on securing that data. Some of the policies that you might have in place for this particular layer are forensics policies. So how are we doing forensics on the data? So, something that we want to make sure we know about. And then as well as encryption and data storage policies. What data is allowed, what kind of data, where are people allowed to touch the data? What's the policy in place for that? On your NAS or your SAN, do all the drives need to be encrypted? how are you going to do that? What's your policy? Do you want hardware-based encryption? Do you want software-based encryption? How do you want to take care of that when it comes down to enterprise and data policy? So again, is there a right or wrong answer to this? No, it depends on what your company and what your philosophy is, but it is something that you need to think about and make sure is written down and in place, that you have that in there to help guide you in planning this stuff out. The virtualization layer. So a lot of us have a lot of this nowadays. How many of you in the audience are doing virtual desktoping now? All right, a lot of you. Virtual servers. More of you, okay. So basically kind of the goal of this is to start heading towards virtualization. Why do I like virtualization? Well, one, it generally tends to be a little bit cheaper. I find it easier. If I have a box get hit by malware, it's a lot easier to restore a snapshot than to try to rebuild that box in there. And yeah, if you're using Ghost, you're doing similar stuff, but I just like the virtualization side of it better myself. The other reason I like it is that I can contain everything on a box, and you start using virtual appliances. We can actually help route traffic through there and do some of that inspection that we were talking about, that we might need to have that provider level switch at the center. Well, now we can kind of emulate a little bit of that by doing some packet inspection between our, using some of the virtual appliances. So gives us kind of a theoretical way to help do more packet inspection on our network and do more securing of the traffic. So we have the virtual server infrastructure. We're worried about our server VMs, our hypervisors, and then the virtual end user infrastructure, which is our virtual desktop and virtual application. So virtual desktop we want, obviously, because for our BYOD, gives us the ability to let any user that they want bring in their own laptop, but the only way that they're accessing the data is by using our desktop. Now, some of you may not like the concept of that because we're forcing Windows on them, or better yet, forcing Linux on them, and the users love being forced into that, as we all know. But that being said, it's kind of a trade-off for them being able to utilize data. Better yet is the virtual application side of it, where we're doing it on an application-based approach instead of a desktop-based approach. And again, that's the way things are going to start heading, in my opinion. One of the solutions out there now actually does it from the standpoint of they will have an app store, and you can actually put in both desktop, traditional PC apps as well as the mobile apps into that app store. So I can go in there, I can sign up for that app store, download that app, and then the data will still be stored on my server. It's interacting with the data on my server, and I'm streaming it in there. Obviously, the main problem with something like that is that you have to have a constant connection. So that's kind of your thing. Although they may have a way, and I have to do more research on this particular vendor to tell you, for sure. But there may be a way to do it offline. I just don't know at the top of my head on there. But again, that's kind of where we're seeing things going, and that's where I think you're going to see more and more virtualization companies go. Microsoft, you'll see VMware head that way on there. So virtual appliances, being able to build in and start using virtual UTMs within these virtual stacks, virtual switching, virtual routing. A lot of you are probably already playing with that nowadays. And some of our policies that kind of go in with the virtualization layer are privacy policies. Big fan of putting privacy policies. How many of you that deal with policies have privacy policies on your network? How many of them deal with deal with the end users instead of dealing with your customers? All right. Advocate privacy policies for end users. Reason why, there are many court precedents out there that will tell you, if you don't say that your network is able to be monitored, if you don't say their email is susceptible to being searched or scanned, technically they have an implicit right to privacy there. And therefore, if they got fired for something, you might be liable on there. Again, court case, not a lawyer, just based on past precedent in there. It's a good thing to always spell out and just say, hey, this is what's expected of you. This is the case. I can go in and look at your email any damn time I want, and you're aware of this now, you know it. So you no longer have that expected right to privacy. Acceptable use, we're all familiar with acceptable use policies. What are you allowed and not allowed to do on the network? Don't look for porn on the network. Don't download that MP3. Only use Facebook during X amount of time. So that's where the acceptable use kind of goes into place. Defensive security infrastructure, most of you are going to be aware with. This is our traditional defensive layer. This is our defense in depth that we've been doing for years. Some of the policies that support on this level, acceptable use, privacy policy. But then when we start talking about BYOD, we talk about support policy. This isn't as much of a concern to some people, but it kind of plays into that hidden cost is, how am I going to handle support if my user are bringing in their own devices? So for those of you doing BYOD, how do you do support on your networks now? Anyone? Oh, come on, someone's got to have a way they do support, no? Okay, and that is one way to do it. Another way that they do it is some of the companies out there, they actually tell you, hey, I'm going to give you X amount of money to buy this laptop. You need to buy an extended warranty. For the next 3 years, anytime that laptop breaks down and it's not a company-issued application, guess where you're going to get it fixed? You're going to that vendor. That's another way to do it. Some companies do it from the standpoint of they will only give you a choice of 5 or 6 types of devices, and that's what they will support. So they might say, hey, we'll support a MacBook Pro, we'll support an HP, we'll support a Sony, blah, blah, blah. And anything outside of that purview, they don't allow on the network because they don't want to support it. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. My personal opinion is that nowadays people are you get more and more people that are computer savvy, that at least to the point where they can call up to a help desk and be able to fix a lot of the stuff on their computers. I tend to go that approach. That's how I like to go. Not everyone likes that approach. There's no right or wrong answer there, but you need to define how you want to do it, and you need to stick to how you want to do it. And the big thing is get management buy-in on that, like especially senior management, because we all know how C-levels like to at times, and for those C-levels in the room, I apologize, but we all know most of you like to, sometimes circumvent those rules to get that little special privilege, pulling rank in the organization. And of course, us as the security people will go, yes, sir, how may I help you today? Because I don't want to get fired and be thrown out on my ass. So yes, so we're going to take care of you because that's what we do. And then change policies. What are acceptable changes? How do we initiate change within our organization? We have to fill out forms. Are changes only done on Wednesdays, on the full moon, when the blood sky is hanging in there, and metaphor just got thrown out the window. So change policy, though, have an idea of how you're doing changes on there. Document it, document it, document it. Make sure that your users and your admin staff know how changes are handled, and stick to that policy. And the big thing going back to policies, if policies are violated, there needs to be repercussions for those violations. I'm not saying fire someone for clicking on the wrong website the first time, but if you're doing security awareness training, you're doing testing, and that guy gets phished 5 or 6 times in the middle of your testing, there needs to be some repercussions to that. Whether it's a write-up, whether they're terminated, whatever, they're clearly not paying attention to it. They're not doing what they're supposed to do, not upholding that end. So you need to have those repercussions, and they need to be enforced, because otherwise your policies are toothless, and then they do no good in your organization, because people are going to start circumventing it, and then you're going to run into, in my opinion, when that happens, that's worse than having bad security. Because then you might think you're secure, and you're really not, and then you're really going to end up in trouble. IPS, IDS, web filtering. Why do we want web filtering even though it's on the other stuff? Because when we're in our network, we still want to protect the data in our network. And the goal, and even though we're not as worried about the outside and everything like that, we still want to protect our internal data on the network. And so part of the reason why defense in depth is still an aspect of this architecture is because I'm basically supporting that data shell. That's my stronghold. That's my, you can't penetrate this. Can't sack my quarterback, you can't break into that chastity belt. This is what I want to protect. We still want to try to put as many obstacles in that place for attackers to do it. And even though we're protecting on the data level, we still want to have that in there. Plus with web filtering, we can kind of get some, again, some additional intelligence on our network. Multi-factor authentication. Obviously, most of us are using some kind of LDAP or AD in our networks. Especially with BYOD, I strongly recommend starting to look at multi-factor in there, and this is in any network, even if you're not doing BYOD, at least start looking at certificates, even if they're custom generated with Microsoft, just adding that additional layer of security in there. But if you can go out later doing certificates with some kind of CA internally, doing tokens, doing biometrics, yeah, those are expensive, but they can offer additional security in there. And we all know how really protected passwords are, right? We all know. So I get to the point now where I'm using like a 25-character password. And it's ridiculous. It's easy for me to remember, but let's be honest. Most users, they have trouble with 6 characters half the time. Some of them 8. I know I have friends that do IT for the Army. And I think they're up to 16 that they have to do. And I was just sitting there going, and their rules are way stringent. So it's just like, how are you guys memorizing all this stuff? And it's something to worry about. So make it easier on your users. Start getting multi-factor in there. You can help make it easier on them, and it helps make it more secure because you don't get the people with the 30 GPU CUDA servers that are out there just owning you. And Those of you that know Pure Hate know exactly what I'm talking about with that very impressive setup that he has. Or go watch the password cracking contest at DEF CON, and then again, watch just go jaw-dropping how impressive those guys are. The border gateway devices, our routers, our firewalls. Now, how many of you actually segment your networks? All right, how many of you only segment by doing VLANs? All right, so when I say segmentation, VLANs are a good start, but I recommend putting in either segmentation firewalls or doing, at least on your layers 3 switches, access lists, really putting in there and limiting what traffic can get to those segments. You know, just having the VLAN up there doesn't necessarily mean it's securely segmented, but putting in there and putting in, starting to get some access lists, again, it's going to limit some of the stuff. Now, the big thing to remember is all this stuff foolproof, hack-proof? Absolutely not. The goal is to mitigate as much of the risk as possible. I'm not foolish enough ever to say that something is hack-proof. I think anyone that says that is pretty much asking for the gods of karma to come down and strike their network down. But the goal is to try to minimize as much as possible. The goal is out there to sit there and basically go, you know, hey, I got this script kiddie, I got this malware out there, how can I limit the effect and damage on there? So that's why we put in stuff like this. Our network switches, devices, access switches, wireless, and our anti-malware devices. When I talk about anti-malware, network-based, I actually talk about two types. We have the stuff that sits in on the gateway. You know, this is like our iron ports. This is like our stuff that's built into UTM. It operates from an outside-in kind of perspective. It's usually very signature-based. And then I talk about the internal malware detection devices. These are things like FireAmp, FireEye that operate more on a heuristics level. There's some signature aspects of it, but they also help with those callbacks. They're a little better with O-days. I actually like combining both of them. Most networks can't afford it because it's not cheap to do. But you know, even though you have a malware gateway, it is something to take a look at and actually have both protection in there and really, you know, really help. You know, there is some overlap, but it does offer quite a bit of protection. I've seen those setups I've seen those setups with that kind of both the gateway and the internal device, and you know, very impressive on what they can pick up between the two of them. Application layer. This is talking about our applications. So, administrative controls that might fall under here. We talked about privacy and acceptable use in forensics. MDM policy. What kind of mobile device management are we doing on our mobile devices? Now, we talked about not being device-centric here, but we still want to do MDM. And I'll get to that in a little bit later when we get to the intelligence layer. There's a very specific reason of what I want MDM, even though I said at the very start I'm not as concerned about focusing on controlling the device. Application servers are front end and our back end. Network-centric applications, which is kind of the client-server model in that particular case. Web-centric, we're all familiar with web-centric, cloud and internal-based. Our mobile apps, either first-party design or third-party design. Most mobile apps tend to be third-party design, stuff you buy at the App Store. But there are companies that go out there and they do mobile development, and they make their own apps out there for their employees to utilize and work on their networks. That's something to keep in mind. And then application layer security. So doing dynamic behavior detection, basically based on the behavior of the application, setting a baseline, being able to do security, making security on the fly and detection using the abnormal baseline on the application level. And then application wrapping. Those who aren't familiar with application wrapping, basically we're taking the internal applications and we're wrapping that around to help give a secure shell around it. Plenty of cool software out there and technologies to do that. Doesn't quite meet the application approach that we're talking about because it can take a little bit away from the native application, but it is a great way and a great start to look at doing. The user device layer. So it's kind of talking about just how policies that, this is more of a policy layer because the devices are simply, you know, the laptops, the tablets, the phones, any device that user is going to access data on the network. That's their endpoint. That's what's going to fall in this device user category. So some of the policies in place and technology. Endpoint DLP. I'm a big fan of DLP. I know it's not the greatest technology out there. People have a lot of issues with it. That being said, it's a start, and if it helps get some of this stuff and blocks some data from going out of your network that's not supposed to me it's a good thing. You know, assuming any tool is going to help you 100% is foolish. But if it can catch some stuff, it's better than where you were before. You have to do, obviously, the cost-benefit analysis and see what are my potential losses versus what the control are. Those of you who have done risk assessments know exactly what I'm talking about. Those of you who haven't, I recommend reading about quantitative risk assessment and just kind of understand the concept. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but just understand about what annual loss expectancy is and the probabilities of an attack happening and how that falls into place. It really will help change your view on security, honestly, and the network. And you kind of get an idea of where your C levels are looking at, and you can correspond with them better, and then you look like the hero sometimes. So endpoint security, we're talking anti-malware, HIPs, that kind of stuff, which we talk about there. So endpoint firewalls, encryption, et cetera. Some of the controls on there are administrative controls, so who's administering what are they allowed to control, support policy, privacy, we talked about forensics. Forensics is a big one with device on the end user device. Company device, we're not worried about forensics. We own the device. We can look at it anytime we want. User device, though, forensics gets a little more tricky. Are your users going to be willing to turn over their computer to do a full forensic investigation, let you take a full forensic image? Some of them will, some of them won't be. I see Chris over there shaking his head, and he's right. There are users that are just going to say, screw you, it's my thing. So you need to really go out there and you need to define that policy with legal. And always, whenever implementing policies, always run them through a legal check. Make sure that it complies with the state laws, with federal laws. And if you're international laws. Otherwise, you might run into a heap of trouble. Because we all know in, for instance, Europe, the privacy controls are a lot stricter than they are in the US, and you don't want to find yourself on the wrong end of that. So, forensics, you want to see, hey, in my state, is it legal for me to be able to do forensic inspection on a user-owned device if I inform them that it is a condition of them using that device on my network? That's kind of where the policy goes. So look at that in there. Again, no right or wrong answers. You just need to make a decision on how you want to do forensics in that front and then go with it and make sure it complies legally so you don't find yourself in legal trouble. Subsidy policy. Are you going to subsidize any part of your employee's purchase, any part of your employee's data? Again, no right or wrong. From an employee standpoint, you're awesome when you give me money to buy toys. You're awesome. And I say every C-level out there, do that, give us money, let us buy it. I understand the ones that don't. I completely understand it, but we do appreciate it when you do, so just hint, hint. And software and encryption policies. Do you require your devices to be fully encrypted? Laptops, I say yes. It's not hard. It doesn't hurt it doesn't really hurt their end user device, even if it's a corporate-owned laptop. It's actually better security for them even on their own, and it's easy to do. So I say help them out, encrypt, do a whole disk encryption, or at least have some kind of encrypted folder on there. But I'm a big fan of whole disk encryption on laptops, obviously. On mobile devices, if it will support it. Obviously, it works a little better on Android than it does Apple in that sense. But Apple does have its own encryption stuff on there. So decide if you require encryption and then enforce that, and then also software if you require certain pieces of software on there. So, for example, you're using your laptop with my data, even if we're delivering it from an application point of view, I require you to have a encryption. I require you to have a anti-malware on there. I require you to have a HIPs on there. I require you to have a firewall on your endpoint. Now, the one thing I will say, if you do start requiring some of this very stringent endpoint security, consider subsidizing the cost of that license for them. Not that expensive to do a mass purchase of some kind of endpoint security suite, and give it to the users as part of the program. Build it into your cost. If we're only talking $20 to $50 a license per year per user, to me it's a good trade-off. And honestly, it promotes better security within the community out there. So for those that don't run antivirus, and just because you're running a Mac does not mean you can't get malware or a virus. Don't make that stupid assumption. And I love Apple. I use Macs at home. It's one of my, I love the architecture. I love the enterprise. I love the computers. But don't make that assumption out there that it's completely, it's completely immune to viruses, because it's not. Now we come to the intelligence layer. This is obviously my favorite layer, and it's under the, those of you who know Schoolhouse Rocky there, is about knowledge is power. So when we talk about the intelligence layer, I always start out with a SIM. Now some people love SIMs, some people think they're a waste of time. These ones that think they're a waste of time don't actually run their program in an efficient way, in my opinion. When I talk about SIM, a lot of times you need a dedicated team. Because you need to have people looking at those SIMs. You need to have people going through, looking for that, looking for that correlation, looking through it. Some people can pull it off without having it. You know, I'm not saying you have to. I just find it works better in that capacity, especially when you get to some of the more complex stuff like the ARC sites, that kind of the world. You know, to me, you really have to have that out there. But the reason we have the SIM in there is to gather more intelligence, be able to take the logs in from some of our other devices, and be able to correlate that information together. Data classification. What we're doing with data classification is based on certain keywords or our own manual tagging. We can say, hey, this data is allowed for public, this data is allowed only internal private, and this is for eyes only, only certain security groups can do it. Based on the same concepts military, government, DoD type uses. The reason we like data classification, it helps make our DLP easier. You know, hey, if I know this is tagged as classified, well, guess what? I really don't want it going out of my network in any type capacity. And again, I like DLP both at the network level and at an endpoint level. If you're going to do it at the endpoint level, you're going to have to subsidize the cost of that license. I mean, you know, asking your user to buy an endpoint DLP that, you know, specific to the one you're using is just, you know, it's asinine. You're just not going to have much success with it. So that's something you have to subsidize, but DLP, along with your data classification, can really go a long way. DRM. And now this might sound funny to have digital rights management here. This is actually something a colleague of mine suggested that they did at their place of work. And what they ended up doing was, anytime the DLP sensed something that was protected data, it would actually redirect it to a DRM solution. It would put DRM rights onto that data and then allow it to go out. So I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So something to think about there, and you know, something to think about there to help offer, again, an additional level of protection of that data. Access control, you know, basic access control. I'm talking about access control, I'm talking a lot about NAC, and we all know NAC has been just a mixed bag of good and suck. And again, and honestly, it's still a mixed bag of good and suck. Only reason I like having it in there, again, it goes back to the intelligence level. If I can profile that device plugging into my network, if I can profile even some of the devices plugging into my network, it gives me more information about my network. And that's a lot of it, again, is getting that information out there. Can NAC be bypassed? Absolutely. And those of you who bought the Pony Express, I think Elite has the NAC bypass built in there. It works pretty damn well. So it is definitely bypassable, but again, sometimes the goal is to get a lot of the low-hanging fruit, and NAC's going to help you profile a lot of that low-hanging fruit out there. Mobile device management. So even though I said don't worry about the device, why do I have mobile device management? Well, two reasons. One, from a security standpoint, mobile device management can help detect jailbreaks, roots on the devices. And yes, as my friend Tom over there pointed out, you know, there is ways to bypass that MDM. But again, we're talking about the majority of users aren't going to have that skill set to do it. And he's actually put in some stuff to the mobile device people to help fix. That is true. That is true. But again, the point going down there on there is, and having it on there is, you are still going to catch a lot of them out there. And again, if you can prevent some people, it's going to give you better protection. And if you go from the viewpoint of at some point you will be breached, then, and you're going on the viewpoint of detection as well as prevention, then even if someone does bypass you, you're still in that proper mentality to try to find them and mitigate the risk. But again, my friend Tom there has actually informed the MDM companies, and hopefully they will be bettering their products here shortly. You said that they were, if I remember correctly? Cool. And then, you know, administrative controls that are out there. By that are policies based on the intelligence layer, letting people know that you're collecting data on them, making sure that it's within the policy to click that intelligence, make sure it's within the policy that they have to use a DLP, they have to use the MDM. Oh, the other reason for the MDM, a lot of MDMs have can do posture assessments or profiling on the devices. Again, more information about the devices that are connecting to your network. One of the main reasons to have them. And you could be using something free like, what is it, Mirakai. Cisco just bought them. They're a free MDM solution. Something as simple as that you could utilize. So these are some possible starting points for the technologies. Just kind of, this is like technologies to implement within the first 6 months. We have existing technologies you might already have in place. Most of you are running LDAP. Most of you have border gateway devices, network, application servers, our network-centric applications, so our client-server models. These are things most of us have in place on our enterprises or on our local networks. I mean, hell, I've worked small businesses with 50 end users and have most of this stuff into place. We also want to implement our administrative controls. Again, my goal and my philosophy is that the technology controls are there to support and maintain and enforce those administrative policies. So that's one of the first things we want to make sure in place is that we have exactly what the goals of our network are and the goals of our security and can inform our users and have that in place from the very get-go as quick as possible. And those are just the various controls that we talked about today, the acceptable use, privacy, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the new technologies to consider implementing within this first section. And that doesn't mean you have to do them all. This is just one possible way of doing it. There is no right or wrong way. It's just one possible thing. Virtual desktop, look at the segmentation devices. I do recommend if you are not segmenting, segment. Start out, obviously VLANs, but then look at doing the access filters at the very least. Most of you are probably between your VLANs are running some kind of layer 3 switch. They might be out there. I'm not familiar with any layer 3 switch. It doesn't offer at least some kind of packet filtering, access layer type thing. Anyone I can think of offers it. So, spend the time, limit the subnets that can hit it, limit the type of data that can hit it, and really protect that out there. Because, and from a simple standpoint of, one, if a hacker breaches your network, make it more difficult on them. Two, if you have a malware outbreak on your network, well, if you can block that port at that level, you're going to help contain that malware from going into other segments of your network. So just a good reason to do it is good general overall security practice. And it should be pretty much free to implement, just some time on your part. Web-centric apps, cloud-based, as we all know, that's a big term in there. There is some benefits to cloud. There's also some security risks there. We're not going to talk about those today, but something to consider in those things in mobile apps. Then from other technologies, your SIM, your MDM, and your DLP solutions. After that, in our first year to 18 months, we have our existing stuff in place. Some of the new stuff we're going to look at is more virtual servers, the virtual appliances. If we don't already have them, IPS and web filtering. And again, a lot of this stuff you see under here, you already have in place, most likely. Some of our multi-factor, our anti-malware. And then a big thing we want to do is reassess our application layer. So looking at the applications that are in place and the way that they're set up, is there a better way to do it? Can we start moving the applications away from a network-centric model to a pure application model? Is there stuff we can move out into the cloud, and are we comfortable with moving it out to the cloud? Software as a service type atmosphere, even if it's a private cloud, is that going to be better for our environment? So reassess that layer. And I can't tell you what's the best for your network. Only you can do that. I'm not that arrogant to pretend I know. But that being said, that constant reassessing, making it better, that to me is one of the goals of our job. And then implementing data classification. And finally, the journey never stops. Don't stop improving. Yes, it's a bad, bad pun. But keep reassessing. Look at adding new application layers, security, access control, DRM, multi-factor. Observe new offerings. And look at industry shifts. A good example is the security analytics I talked about. We're starting to see it in its infancy come out in consumer on a corporate commercial base. And you're going to start seeing it grow more and more over the next 5 to 10 years. So security analytics are going to be a big thing in my opinion. There's going to be other technologies out there that are going to be just as important, that putting them in your network might offer you a additional level of security, might be able to replace existing things and make your network more efficient and make your security better as well as more efficient. So future research directions, there's certain industry-specific difficulties that we may have to overcome. For example, medical is a perfect example. There are some places where you're not allowed to have a constant internet connection, so if everything's virtualized and we don't have a way to kind of cache that, well, we run into a problem there. So how do we overcome that problem? And honestly, I don't have a solution yet. So field testing, the architecture design, we've done labbing on this. We obviously have the virtual concept here, but we need to do more case studies. And doing case studies around specific vendor offerings. So, whether focusing on just Cisco, just Checkpoint, a combination of VMware with Cisco, blah, 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 around those specific vendor offerings. See what works best. So those of you who have done POCs know exactly what I'm talking about. And case studies in specific verticals. So healthcare industry, government, et cetera. Where does it work? Where does it not? So big thing I want to leave today is this. So this is a design I came up with based on a lot of research. Is this the only design out there? No. Is this a perfect design that can't be hacked? No. Anyone that tells you it could is an idiot, because nothing is unhackable in my opinion. As we've seen, even the Iranian nuclear facility not connected to the internet breached by Stuxnet. skiff rooms, not connected to the internet. It's supposed to be the most secure of the secure. Got breached, and that's how we ended up with the Manning and the WikiLeaks case. It's possible to do it. Nothing is hack-proof. So, and the whole goal of this presentation isn't to say go implement this as is. It's just to give you ideas. Look at it. This is one approach. There are numerous approaches out there. I'm a big believer in research, and the whole point of research in any community is to build upon other research. So look at the research, see, hey, this is a good idea, this is a stupid idea, I think I could make this work, I think I could tweak this in a way and make it better. And that's the big takeaway I want you to take away and go with it. But always be assessing what you're looking and always be looking for, always be looking for a more efficient way to do it. So that's everything today. Went a little long, my apologies, but does anyone have any questions today? All right. Well, then, thank you all. Yes, ma'am. All right, sir.